Hey everybody, this is Stella. This is my cat. Some sharp claws. Um, but she just thought I'd introduce you to her. She's the most affectionate cat I've ever had. Um, and you can see that she has these prominent thumbs here on both of her claws. She'll probably come back in here. But just wanted to introduce you to her. Hope everybody's doing well. Um, as we're over a week now with our time away, um, and you know, make the most of this time. I said that in the last video, but it's really important that you do get caught up on reading. Be thankful that you don't have all those other stressful things going on all at once. It's definitely a positive way to look at what's happening right now. I know it's tough for you guys as seniors, um, but relax, get your sleep. I shared in one of my other videos with one of the other classes that we're going through a book, and the American Pediatrics Association recommends that you get 12 hours of sleep, which I know none of you probably do. Um, but it might be a good time to kind of try some of that out and see if it makes a difference, and maybe make some plans for when we do come back to see if you can make some changes that way. Hopefully you're finding ways to adjust and make the most of your time and things like that. I do have some movie recommendations for you. These are not necessarily philosophy movies, um, but they're movies that you may not have seen that are well worth watching. Use your discretion in terms of inappropriate content and things like that. These movies overall are pretty free of a lot of that stuff, but they're really good. Um, some of them have been nominated for Academy Awards and things like that. But the first one is Captain Phillips with Tom Hanks. You may have seen that, you may not have seen it. I don't know. Really good though. It looks at modern day piracy on the high seas. And it had me hooked from beginning to end. I just saw it recently. It had been out for a while. Very good movie, though. Some other ones are The Last Emperor, which looks at China prior to and during the Japanese invasion of their country, which is a really good movie that shows a lot of that stuff. Mississippi Burning is a good movie. It looks at the Jim Crow South and some of the racial tensions that were there and some of the things that happened. Gene Hackman's in it. Good movie from what I remember of it. Schindler's List used to be a movie that everybody saw, and now about a decade has gone by where now you have a lot of people who haven't seen it. It details the Holocaust. It's difficult to watch, but it really does a good job of showing you who Oscar Schindler was and what the Holocaust was really like in Germany and beyond. Another good movie is Glory with Denzel Washington, which looks at the All African American Regiment in the Civil War, true story. The 54th Maine and the white general that commanded them, Matthew Broderick. Was his name, or the actor that played him, I should say. And so it's really good movie, strong. Gods and Generals is another one that looks at the Civil War era. Reminds you who these generals really were. They were kind of rock stars in their time in terms of the way the public looked at them and the decisions they had to make and things like that. Another movie too that really has disappeared from public consciousness, anyways. When I was a kid, it was a big movie. It was called Ragtime. It's long. Okay, it came out. It came. It came out. I think it was in 1980, 81. It was one of James Cagney's last movies, but it was really good. It looks at that time period, late 19th, early 20th century, and some of the racial issues that were going on in the country. There's 6 movies there, or 7, maybe, that I gave you. That's worth your time. Some of them are longer movies, but just gauge your interest and see if that's something you're interested in. As far as philosophy goes, we'll continue to kind of delve into this book here. And we're going to look at chapter 3, which kind of looks at the power of emotional language as specifically seen in propaganda. And so there's about 12 different aspects of propaganda the author brings up to be careful of. Now, it's important for you to know what propaganda is. It is not always wrong. For instance, advertisement uses a bunch of it, but it is important that you're aware of it so that you're not manipulated by it. So when we try to figure out truth, there's a lot more than just the tools that a propagandist would use. This can have simple consequences for your life, or it can have devastating consequences not only for your life but for a nation's life. So the first principle is this idea of bandwagon. A propagandist will, just like the fallacy that we talked about, will get the public to be on the side of what everybody's doing. Get on board. This is a great movement. This is a great thing. Don't be left behind. Jump on the bandwagon before it's too late. So we've seen that happening before. Certainly when you see scenes of Adolf Hitler and talking about the German people as one, as if he were speaking to them. Also, something we learned in a very dark way from the Nazis, there was a phrase, I think it was Goebbels who said this, that if you repeat a lie often enough, people will believe it. So sometimes propagandists use the tool of repetition to say something over and over again, even if it's highly questionable. You keep repeating it, and eventually people will be so used to it that they will accept it as truth. The propagandists will say what they say with confidence. So they'll use a lot of confidence and boldly proclaim what they're saying, even if it's not entirely true or if it can be challenged significantly. You say it loud enough and with confidence, it can be something that's pretty persuasive. Along with that, the propagandists will use earnestness and sincerity, to show you that they really believe what they're saying, or they'll attempt to portray that to you. Very earnest and sincere in the claims that they're making. They really care. Is another way that you can be swayed emotionally by a propagandist. Oversimplification, where you only look at one side of an issue, where you oversimplify one side and you don't give all of the feedback to the other side. So this is done to make people have an issue that they really make it something that they can grasp, something that they can believe. It's just really about this when it actually might be much more complicated. So political issues, foreign policy issues, things like that can be oversimplified by the propagandists. And they often will only present one side of an issue. Many times, name calling is used by the propagandists to get you to paint somebody in a certain light. A name will be used over and over again. To call a problem a certain thing is name calling, to get you to think about it a certain way, to use words a certain way, to label something a certain way will go a long way, or a person a long way, to getting the propagandists to kind of sway you to their point of view. Closely related to this is stereotyping, where you take one aspect of maybe someone's personality or a certain situation, and you say this is all there is to it. You create a stereotype. This person will always be like this. When you look at Hollywood movies, for instance, many times, how are lawyers portrayed? How are, police officers, many times it's changing now, but there was always some corruption involved, for a long period of time in cinema, involving police officers and things like that. They've even looked at kind of the way the American dad is portrayed, from Homer Simpson to all sorts of different movies, comedies, sitcoms. The dad is kind of the clueless one in a lot of these. It's a stereotype that's created. We talked about Hubert Humphrey, who ran for president, and the idea that Humphrey was characterized as a big windbag, and they took, because he talked for a long period of time, and they took that aspect of his personality and just made him to be that completely. And it wasn't entirely fair, many would argue, because he had some meaningful things to say. But that's irrelevant when you basically stereotype somebody. You get one aspect which may or may not be true of that person's personality and kind of emphasize that. Glittering generalities, which can be you make a general statement which may or may not be true, and you don't get into specifics at all. You just make general statements about things that may be exaggerated and overblown. Is another thing that the propagandists will use. Along with slogans. Slogans can be effective because they're rhetorically enticing. So think of America, love it or leave it. Well, that has, for a long period of time, that can excuse a lot of bad policy. If you criticize the government or you criticize a certain policy, then you don't love America. If you don't like it, get out. When there's many more options, right? Maybe it's because you love America that you are protesting a certain policy. Think of Make Love, Not War is another one. Where those are your two options, or all we are saying is give peace a chance. Oversimplifying maybe slogans that are effective. They also sometimes don't point out the complexity of the situation. It's just this simple. If you think about it this way, that can be used. Think of in advertisements all the time. Slogans are used to kind of frame an issue or a circumstance. And then transfer. So you see this in kind of if you think of cigarette ads and things like that, you see something that actually creates quite a number of health issues. Yet you often see a cigarette advertisement in a magazine, for instance, with the Grand Canyon as a background, or nature, right? You see a whitewater rafting. I remember one. It was, I don't know, Salem cigarettes or something like that, and it was always people doing something very active. When a lungful of tobacco smoke tends to cause you to not be able to do some of those things for very long. But that is another thing that happens with transfer. Another piece of or a tool that a propagandist will use is with the testimonial, where you get somebody famous to kind of just speak on behalf of your product or what you are trying to convince somebody of, and it's almost like an appeal to authority, which is a logical fallacy. Just because this person likes this doesn't necessarily mean it's true at all. Maybe you've seen advertisements of celebrities that have gotten involved with products late in their career, and they're kind of hurting for money, and then you see them kind of an odd product of some kind that you never really associated them with, but all of a sudden they're on there kind of talking about that thing. That can kind of point to some of the things that we're talking about here. Another one is the plain folk kind of propagandist tool, where it can really be a down-to-earth pragmatic solution to everything, where someone says, well, forgive me, but I'm just a plain folk, and we look at the world real simple, and that appeals to people's desire to have things that are very simple explained to them, and very, very common. And the common person doesn't get caught up in all this rhetoric and all this stuff that they don't understand, that life really is simple. If you just do these certain things and you emotionally approach things a certain way, things will be okay. Of course, life tends to be much more complicated than that at times. The plain folk, what I remember is I think it was a Dodge commercial in the 2004, 2008 Republican National Convention, the Farmer, which is it's a neat commercial, actually. It kind of shows all the different things that a farmer does, and it goes on and on about how a farmer wakes up at dawn and delivers, helps deliver babies for its animals, and goes to the school board meeting, and does all these things that you never really thought of that involved, that a farmer does, and how they've made America great. It's a Paul Harvey message. And that's used though, that's kind of a plain folk idea that maybe there's one truck, one vehicle that kind of points to that. Think of it this way: if you've ever watched all the truck commercials, the four-wheel drive trucks that are out there now, those trucks are, especially full-size ones, can be very expensive and pricey. And what do you see on the commercials? You see them going through, rugged terrain and climbing mountains and going over boulders. When in reality, the vast majority of people who probably own those things, own those trucks, don't do any of that because they don't want to damage their vehicles. But yet that's kind of the idea. It's there for you if the possibility of actually doing that. The other thing that can happen in propaganda is name calling. So I don't know if I mentioned that already, but let me give you an example in politics where this happens, if I didn't mention it. In politics, you can have name calling. For instance, somebody can be labeled themselves a progressive. So in that word, progressive is progress. So anything forward-looking or a change of any kind is automatically, by the way that you use the word, viewed as positive, viewed as progress, as forward-thinking. So guess what that says about the person who's not a progressive? What is inherent in that type of message? Likewise, many times a word like reactionary is used to describe somebody who maybe wants to keep things the same. That'll be a word that will make it sound like you want to go back to an earlier time where things weren't as good or weren't as positive. So these names are thrown around by propagandists all the time to kind of demonize or celebrate one side ahead of time. And likewise, maybe the conservatives can call some of the progressive or the forward-thinking ideas as dangerous, or leading us down a destructive path. Many times is what's used there. The propagandists too, and you see this a lot in just media today, and some of the information that you see online or on the websites you visit, is to offer statistics without context. Statistics can often be used. You can, there's an old saying that you can make statistics say whatever you want them to say. And I think you've taken enough surveys in your lifetime so far to even understand the way things are worded sometimes will largely dictate the result that you want. If you ask a question in a certain way, you're likely to get a response that you're looking for. How many times have you taken a survey and you said, well, I can't really say yes or no to this. There's 7 or 8 other scenarios that I would need to spell out, but the survey is only giving you 1 or 2 options. So how reliable is that survey going to be? How many people did they ask? Was it a reliable survey? There's been surveys that have come out that have claimed to prove all sorts of things. In at least one survey I'm aware of, it sampled the prison population. So I don't know about virtually all of the people they asked, but a large number were incarcerated. So just think what that says in terms of a specific demographic, in terms of who they use to kind of do that. I don't know if you can see my cat walking in front of the TV. Another one, large numbers are often used. And I'll give you a real example, kind of tying into the statistics. 250,000 hairdressers believe in what L'Oreal hair coloring can do for you. Okay, so L'Oreal hair coloring. 250,000 hairdressers believe in what L'Oreal can do for you. It doesn't really say that much, does it? What does that mean? Does that mean it can do positive things for me? Is 250,000 a large number? How many hairdressers are there in the world? Do 9 million of them say something else? Do they use another different hair coloring product? Now that may be true, and remember, when I'm going over this, and a lot of times there's nothing wrong with bringing these things up. It's just that you have to be aware that it can be used to manipulate you if these are the only things that we rely upon or trust. So 250,000 hairdressers say something kind of generic about this hair product. Maybe they think it's great, but it doesn't really tell you. And why are they, if there is something stronger that they would say there, why don't they say what that is? So they kind of use that. when I was a kid, and I don't know if you guys have seen this, if it's been, if it's still a commercial or an ad that airs, but it was about Dentyne sugarless gum. And when I grew up, there was a big debate over whether, kids should chew gum. And I always used to get those Bazooka Joes. I don't know if they still sell those, the individual ones that are like 3 cents or 5 cents, but you could go to like your local convenience store, and as a kid, if you had no money, you could get a Bazooka Joe, and it came with a little comic. But there was a big debate, stopping kids from chewing gum, and their teeth were going to rot out, and they get cavities, and all the rest of it. But one of the big advertisements that was on all the time was for Dentyne sugarless gum. And what they would always say in the ad was Dentyne sugarless gum. 4 out of 5 dentists recommend Dentyne sugarless gum for their patients who chew gum. So think about that. Dentyne sugarless gum, okay? 4 out of 5 dentists recommend it for their patients who chew gum. Well, no kidding. If you're chewing gum, I would imagine if you're a dentist, you want to recommend a sugarless gum. So what's more interesting is who's the one dentist out of the 5 that didn't recommend sugarless gum for their patients who chew gum? That's the real question to ask. And also, were there 5 dentists asked? Were there 10 dentists asked? Were there, 5 million? Because what they want to give you there, the image they want to portray is 4 out of every 5 dentists that were asked. Well, the survey they did was not that large, so it kind of gives some information there that we have to be careful of. When you hear dentists recommending gum, if you first hear that and you're not careful with what you hear, you may be going out and you start to chew gum when you never did before, and it can have a negative effect that you weren't counting on. Another thing that propagandists will do, they will create a problem, identify a villain, and then offer a solution. Okay. Now the problem may be real, or the problem may be something that you were not aware of until they brought it up, they brought it to your attention, or created it. I'm going to go dark for a second, but in Nazi Germany, we've been focusing on advertisement, but this was done in a real negative way. So if you think of the problem, which was the Treaty of Versailles, along with some of the problems that they were having in society economically, the Nazis blamed the Jews, among others, along with communists and a whole lot of other groups. But the Jews primarily were targeted. Here's the problem. Notice that this group of people tend to have money, and they're not hurting in the way that most of the other Germans are. So the Nazis targeted them as villains, and then unfortunately, we know what the final solution was, which was really disturbing and has impacted us, humanity, for many, many years. So that's where that tool of a propagandist can be very deadly. Also, finally, card stacking, which is you stack the deck. It's called. In one giving just one side of a problem. So let's say that I went to you name the country. Say it was Laos or Cambodia, some country in Asia that you've never been to. And I said I talked to all these people there, and they are in total agreement that the United States of America is a real imperialist, and I went on and on and on, and I kept coming back and said, well, I'm telling you what everybody in Laos and Cambodia believe about this country. Well, how are you going to respond to that? You haven't been there. I'm not offering specifics. I'm not giving you video evidence or anything like that. So I can use this tool to make it sound very persuasive when I could actually be lying. And there would be no way for you to challenge or to test that. Okay. Now, one of the drawbacks with what I'm kind of doing with you right now and identifying logical fallacies, especially in day-to-day language and the way emotions can play into information that's communicated with each other, is for us to throw our hands up in the air and say, well, you can't trust anybody. They do this all the time. It's not that. It's just that you have to be aware and be able to identify it. And it takes work to pursue truth and to look at all sides of an issue, which is why I have you very often do Socratic circles and deal with issues where there's more than one side. And to learn to challenge and to learn to kind of talk back to your blind spots a little bit. Is this just propaganda? Have I been manipulated? Have I ever really questioned some of these things I believe? Have I looked at the other side? Don't just give me. So a lot of times, what happens is if we want to hear about the other side, we're going to listen to the side that we already believe. Tell us about the other side. That's not really having an open mind, and certainly not being a philosopher in a way that Socrates would understand, or would kind of be a genuine philosopher. You in order to really understand two sides of an issue, you need to consider the best that the other side has to offer. While you look at the best of what maybe the side is that you feel is true. Look at the best of both sides and then make up your mind. That way you're not going to be at the mercy of propaganda. Right now with what's going on, I can tell you I've been going different networks looking at some things that are talked about, and it's amazing that even with this you can see different things emphasized, and things like that. So it's important to get your news sources from a variety of places. And when we're looking at philosophy in general, what is real, what is true, what is right, and what is wrong, how do we govern ourselves, some of those categories, what is beauty, it's very important that you do the hard work of reading some different ideas about that. You're all philosophers. You guys, one of the things I miss about being with you, and maybe we can work this out as the weeks go on, I miss hearing from you and what your opinions are and what you have to say. I think you've done an excellent job in the things that we've discussed, of kind of role modeling appropriate ways to debate the issues. I would argue that students who take philosophy seriously and learn to incorporate that as part of their lives are going to be very successful in the future, at least in managing their own lives and not being manipulated or controlled by others. In a society like ours, it's important to learn to get along with others even if we don't agree with them. And maybe something that they're saying is true. Is there something that I can, take in there and maybe is true? In coaching, I don't talk a lot about that, but I'm a baseball coach, a lot of you know. And a lot of things that some coaches say, I've gone to clinics for years, and they'll say, I can always learn something new from any coach. And that's one of the things I think is actually true. I've gone to, been around other high school coaches, even, maybe you don't even think they're a good coach, but there's usually something I can learn from them. There's something that they're doing, and this works for teaching too. There's something that they're doing that, that's not a bad idea. And you might not accept 99% of, but that 1%, sometimes there's some truth there. There's something that you can kind of appreciate. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go through, continue to go through these chapters in this book. So just think of the tools of a propagandist, how emotional language can be used to manipulate us. And we're going to go forward. And then as we go, I'm going to do some thinking over the weekend. And maybe we can read short articles together and figure out a way that we can talk to one another. Again, I miss you guys a lot, and I love being able to talk to you this way, but it'd be better in person. But we'll get through this, and I really believe that, obviously. I'm not just saying that, but and we'll see each other again. And then so I'll figure something out over the weekend, and if you get a chance, watch some of those movies. They're really worth your time. I'll try to think of some others too. But until then, have a good weekend. The weather's going to warm up again. Next week's a little chilly next few days, but after that, the weather will be nice. Get outside, break your day up best you can. And enjoy the fact that you don't have so many things to stress out about. That you can kind of relax, read, learn some of those things, and just make the most of it. So, talk to you soon. Take care of yourselves.